Welcome to the Georgia Fencepost podcast. Today we will feature Sgt. Holden and Sgt. White, both competitors in the 2023 Region 3 Best Warrior competition. Knowing that you were going to be competing in the state and region, Best Warrior competition, what is something that you did to prepare yourself physically?
Doing a lot of weightlifting exercise, followed by later in the day working on just cardiovascular endurance, rucking, as well as just eating that chicken and rice as much as possible.
There you go.
As much as I could take of it.
Right.
So.
What about you?
Nothing really changed in my regular routine. I usually just do like CrossFit classes, like off post.
You didn't change any of your routine?
No. Kept it straight, kept it consistent.
Are you rucking or are you running as well?
We do a little bit of running. Sometimes they'll do like burden runs. So we'll get like, like a sandbag or something like that. And I'll be like, all right, go run like 200 meters with this and come back in and like do push-ups and pull-ups and squats.
And do you feel like that prepared you well enough for to compete in the state and the regional Best Warrior competition?
Oh yeah. It just, it gets you ready for pretty much anything.
Okay, and what about you? Do you feel like what you did, like you're leading up to the actual competitions, it was enough? Like, do you feel like you peaked at the right time?
Yes, it was my peak, but I still would like to have done more, to do more going forward. The physical events weren't necessarily my strong suit, so I'd like to, obviously make them my strong suit.
Right. For those who don't know, what are the events in the regional Best Warrior? When it comes to the physicality portion, could you name off some of them?
We'd have, what we do? We did ACFT, we did an O course, the water survival.
Land nav is a lot of running.
Oh yeah, land nav, big time.
And then the rucking. Yeah, I mean, really the two biggest events are the land nav and the rucking. At state, my land nav course was like maybe 7 miles, and then at regionals probably did like 10. So.
For land nav, just walking, like the amount of walking you did?
Walking / running, yeah.
Okay. And then for the ruck, for those who don't, ruck march often, could you explain what that is or what it entails?
There's a good deal of preparation going into the ruck if you're going to do it right, as far as making sure you got the right boots, your ruck's packed properly, you got all your goos, your candies and drinks and everything you're going to take on that ruck. And then, yeah, it's just carry, in our case, 35 pounds, 16 miles as fast as possible.
Right. And then with you being in the Marine Corps previously, was that something that you'd say that gave you an advantage, being that, that was something you did there as well?
Oh yeah, like we'd ruck, we didn't ruck, it was more of marching, like a forced walk. But we definitely practiced that a lot.
Right.
And it was more or less like a group effort at that point. But rucking, like for competition, it's just your mind. You just gotta run, walk, settle in, because you're gonna be there for a minute.
How long was the regional, the ruck?
It was closer to 16 miles.
Closer to 16 miles.
That's a long time. What was your times?
Oh.
Like 3 hours and 30 minutes.
I was like 3 hours and 50.
And in between that, so you're running, and then I think it was on like sand, right? So you're running and then walking and just basically like pacing yourself.
Yeah, those tank trails, kind of slippery at some points.
At night, and there's puddles and feet sticking in the mud.
Holes in the ground that you don't see sometimes, and then
yeah, this guy rolled his ankle.
Oh
pretty
yeah.
good.
Mm. So how did you get through that? Knowing that's a grueling 15+ mile.
Oh, me, I hooked the speaker up to my ruck, and then just kind of zone out. I mean, staying engaged with like what's in front of you, environmental-wise. But other than that, like, other than making sure you're moving those feet, keeping your pace, and not stepping in holes.
I like counting too.
What do you mean?
Like I'll every like fourth step I'll do like 1 and then 2, and I'll count to like, I don't know, 60 or something like that. And then I'll start doing walking and then count every other step.
So it just helps keep your mind occupied?
Yeah, it keeps it occupied, but also like kind of allows me to like turn off my brain a little bit at the same time. So it's like I'm not thinking about like, oh, this hurts. I mean, of course, like, when I stepped in that hole, I was like, this hurts.
Getting into the actual competition, like, what were some of the biggest challenges, like along, not just physically, but like mentally? Like, what were some of the events that, you know, could burn you out, or not only with preparation, but actually competing against other people in the region?
The hardest part about it was like staying engaged through each task, keeping that focus. But I still feel like I did a pretty good job of maintaining focus and dropping, you know, whatever happened in the previous event and focusing on the next one right before me.
Right.
A lot of people, I think, would point towards the ruck march as being the most mentally challenging, because a lot of people do get to that point right towards the end, or maybe it's in the middle, but usually somewhere around there where it's like, why am I doing this? I want to just go home and my feet hurt.
I want to be done.
But I fortunately never really hit that wall. I just was able to kind of keep moving through the whole thing, and I credit that to you know, the physical training I did leading into it, as well as like the preparedness I had that I largely attribute to my sponsors in terms of like what I brought with me on the ruck, my ruck being properly packed, all that sort of minutia surrounding it. So
Okay. And what about you?
I kept letting like little things get in the way of like being successful. Like the 50 cal, what was that? Like not being able to get the bolt out, like because my pin was like too big for the hole to go in. And so I just like, I'm sitting there struggling with it, and I wasted time. So it was like a lot of like little things that kept me down.
Right, so just like really small, minute details.
Yeah, and then I just held on to it the whole time. So, you know.
So would you say you let it bother you?
I did, cause like I was sitting there like I know I'm better at this than this time or like this performance or like these goes and no goes say on paper, but it was just like one little mistake would set me back like a while.
Right. How do you deal with that? You know, when it comes up.
You don't deal with it the way I did. Don't hold on to it. Do like he said. He's like, you know what? I just dropped it, moved on, and everything. But I guess I just didn't.
yeah, I mean, it's also probably easier, or I know it's easier to let go of mistakes and to keep a good mindset when like you know you're in the lead, like you know you're holding on to that lead, and you just got to keep pushing it. Like I'm sure this guy can attest, state versus regional. Like state, you probably didn't worry about mistakes and stuff. You were like, I'm flying through this competition, beating all these dudes around me, like don't have to worry. And then you get to regionals, and then like if you start snowballing, it's easy to kind of tumble downhill from there, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Murphy definitely threw a big old snowball at me.
I mean, I didn't win state. And so I came to regionals like kind of with a chip on my shoulder. Like I wasn't gonna let any of those dudes beat me. Being in the lead versus not, and like how that affects your mentality is because that's something I may very well have to address at nationals and like really push myself to finish strongly in that competition and try and win that one. So.
All right. So when you think about nationals, but just when you think about readiness as a whole, these competitions are meant to test that, you know. So being ready, both physically, mentally, spiritually. You said that you didn't feel like you were mentally like challenged as much. Like, what about the long like grueling nights, like with little sleep and, you know, still having to perform very well? Like, isn't that something that plays its part as well?
I mean, I think I got a lot of the mentally challenging parts out of the way in the training leading up to it. Like, if you live under those stressful conditions and perform under those stressful conditions consistently leading up to an event like that, whether it's best warrior, a combat deployment, a job interview, whatever, like if you're training under those stressful conditions, when it's actually time to do it, in a way it's less stressful.
When you think about like combatives and, you know, that type of mindset, like an infantryman, a lot of those activities are regimented, and infantrymen typically do really well in competitions or with that type of training because that's the lifestyle they live. But with you, working on aircraft, basically your entire career, do you feel like that gave you an advantage, or any of that experience that you had working on helicopters?
I mean, there's like one event maybe where being a mechanic was an advantage, changing the tire.
Oh, God. That event.
No, I mean, like, going into state and then obviously like keeping that same game plan going into regionals was like, knowing I'm going to be surrounded by a bunch of combat MOSs and, the more physical MOSs, or MOSs like, not that they don't do a bunch of physical stuff generally, but like 68 Whiskey where like that translates super well into some of the specific events of the competition.
Right.
I knew that, like, we knew our focus and like my focus needed to be on, as you said, like utilization of my mental abilities and focusing on those soldier tasks, and just using that to gain the edge where I may have lost it in the more physical activities.
Right.
Because
So,
that's
like,
only part of the competition.
So like the mount lane, which I think it implemented a lot more of those because you're doing the, I guess you can call it stress shooting, even though they're just dummies. Yeah. You're doing the, like a medevac, you have to do like nine line, you have to do misreport. Could you explain some of that as well?
Yeah, I mean, like during the IMT lane, which, I mean, it's not an IMT lane, it's the Mount Town lane, but you just, went and cleared a village like on your own, which typically you don't do, but for the purpose of competition, that's how it went down.
Yeah, it's definitely weird treating a casualty with no
security. Like, and you're like sitting
they got
there,
gunshots going off and explosions,
tossing like little like poppers just right next to you and everything. That scared me.
But it's meant to be stressful. Like, it's meant to be challenging for you.
It's meant to be stressful, but like coming from like the infantry side, it's like you get. As soon as you start, it's just like, okay, this is muscle memory. Like, this is just me working through an issue, one piece at a time. Whether it's like stopping the bleeding right here, like doing your little blood sweep, checking for exit wounds, the whole nine, and then getting on a radio and being able to call up a 9 line the correct way. And then after that, it's just like, get them off the X, or get them to the chopper. And I almost said it in the Arnold voice too. Sorry, but it really just turns into like a muscle memory thing. Like it's engraved.
So with that, especially with both of you being NTOs and then performing well at the state level competition and then performing well at the regional, do you feel like you could teach that class to incoming soldiers or people like recruits that haven't been taught it?
Being in a non-combat MOS, I see more of what like the general guardsman looks like, and I think everybody knows all these tasks. It's nothing new that you haven't ever seen before. I mean, granted, most people probably haven't shot an AT-4 or like used a Claymore, but in general, most of the tasks, like everybody's done in basic training. So they may not be proficient at it. There's a knowledge base somewhere in there, and that makes it super easy to teach them or reteach them. To answer your second question, like, yes, I feel like I could teach all this stuff, and I primarily attribute that to the fact that I'm not starting at ground zero. Like it's like upon a solid foundation that all these soldiers should and most likely do have.
If you had to give advice to a younger soldier coming in that wanted to compete or wanted to get ready for that, what advice would you give?
This is a laundry list. There's a lot of stuff to prepare if you want to compete to win. But the general synopsis of it is you got to get in that basic training book, that green book that you get in basic training, and go through all your warrior tasks and make sure you know them all. I mean, that's the primary thing. That's what we're being evaluated on.
Come into the competition, like, and it's a massive training event, you know. So you come in, hit the ground running, do your best, and go for the win, but then like take that opportunity and like see where all the holes got poked, you know. Like if you're deficient at something,
right?
Like, hey, you need to hit on that. It's not in my wheelhouse, then I need to practice it. I need to put it in there.
With you, with nationals, you know, the biggest competition that you can compete in. How do you feel, you know, leading into that, you know, with that being a couple of months away?
I mean, my thought process on it is like, I haven't won, I'm not a winner. Like, the dust has not settled as it has for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, fire's out.
Like, and so with that being said, like, I don't know, that's kind of just like, I guess, my tactic of alleviating that pressure. And in a way, I going back to it, like, I think it's kind of a good thing that I didn't win state because it's given me sort of that baseline of like, this is how you should feel going into the competition. Like, you feel like you didn't win, have that chip on my shoulder, knowing like, yeah, there's tough competition out there and I might not be the strongest, but that doesn't mean I can't win.